Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Father-Son Packers podcast, your source for Packers news, notes, and analysis. My name is Tommy, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my dad, Matt, although not from his usual location, so apologies for any audio that's a little bit different than usual. But, Dad, on location, how you doing?
Isn't our audio always different?
That's
But
fair.
it's a special mountain edition. I'm here in the Sierra Nevadas, in the cabin, but internet signal's stable so far. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah. But anyway, we are here today. We are kind of in the middle of the doldrums of summer of the NFL calendar, so not a lot of news going on. But we kind of figured we would take these handful of episodes before training camp really starts up in a few weeks, and have one bit of a downer episode, and then have one bit of a more of an uplifting episode. Unfortunately for y'all today, this is a bit of the downer episode. We're going to go over today a few of the things that we are maybe more our question marks around the Packers, our worries around the Packers, some things that maybe cause us a little bit of hesitation when we're talking about this team in the scope of where they want to get, which we've heard from a lot of players is like Super Bowl. I think we heard it was Josh Jacobs was talking about it the other day when he was doing interviews. I think it was on Yahoo. We've heard Jordan Love talk about it. We've heard Keyshawn Nixon talk about it. We've heard all of these players, talk about, with they have very lofty goals for this season. But, today we're going to talk a little bit about why maybe, we have some worries along with, some hope for this team. But Dad, before we get into any of that, we should probably pitch a couple of things. And that is that if you like what you hear here today, please subscribe. We would really appreciate it. Please leave a review, 5-star review. I mean, hopefully that one. Like, if you otherwise don't leave a review. If you don't like it,
acceptable.
If you don't like it, just don't leave a review at all.
Hack into the system and give us extra stars. That's okay too.
But anyway, please subscribe. Please follow us on Twitter at FatherSonPacker. We tweet out whenever we have new episodes out, stats that we find when we're doing research for these episodes, content from other Packers content creators that we enjoy, piece of Packers news, whether that's roster moves, injury reports, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, one-stop shopping for everything Titletown. Once again, that's at FatherSonPacker on Twitter. Subscribe on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Put all our episodes out there. Leave a comment. We would love to chat back and forth with you about the Packers. But anyway, Dad, I guess there's no real news in Packers Town, which we would normally be going over now. So maybe we should just get into it and start with a couple of the things that maybe we are more. I don't know how to phrase it. Would you say these are questions? Would you say these are worries? How would you phrase it?
That's a little bit of both. There are things that worry us because there are questions surrounding these particular topics, and it might not turn out to be bad. I mean, it's a worry, not a doomsday scenario.
You sounded really confident there. I love it. It might not be bad. It might be okay.
I've got little rays of hope sprinkled in here and there. Maybe.
Okay, well,
that is how much hope that is, and can be decided by the listener.
Yeah, because this team, I think we're confident about a lot of pieces of it, but there are certainly a couple places where you could nitpick. But anyway, I guess let's get into it. Dad, what is the first thing where you're like, okay, I need to see this get better at least if I'm going to feel more confident in this team? What are you questions about, worries about going into 2024 for Green Bay?
Okay, so this is, I think, something that's not going to be a surprise to most of our listeners. Tackling on by the Packers defense.
Wow, you went really niche. I was, if you look at mine, I hadn't looked at yours really yet. You're going very, very hyper specific, but I love it because we have not been a good tackling team for a little bit now.
Yeah, so I looked at just PFF tackling grades over the last 5 years, basically since LaFleur's been there. There's a funny outlier. So last year, by PFF grade, they were 14th in the league.
Joe Barry's first year, they were literally god tier tackling for no reason. I don't understand.
Yeah, so 2022, so 2 years ago, they were 13th, and then 2021, Joe Barry's first year, they were second in the entire league in PFF tackling grade.
Yeah,
so,
and a lot of that.
I do remember that first year. Remember talking about him like doing the tackling drills himself. But then before that, 2020, they're 18th, and 2019, they're 19th. So he had like this one outlier year.
Yeah, and that year also was kind of coincided with Devondre Campbell just playing out of his mind for an entire year. I think he missed like one or two tackles himself in that entire year. And
hardly any at all. Yeah,
I remember thinking, I was like, oh, like maybe he's a linebacker coach and he's just really good at coaching tackling. So like, no,
that was I thought as well, because he had like linebackers come out of the Rams and get like career numbers and their career contracts after being there. but
Yeah,
it
and I
only
can't
lasted
even
a year.
remember. I can't even remember what the name of that linebacker from the Rams was that we really wanted, who ended up going to the Raiders and disappearing. It was like Corey Littleton or something like that.
That
Um,
might be right.
it was something like
I
that
was
where
going
it
to
was
say, it's a last name with multiple syllables.
okay. All right. Well, you're really really
I'm
going
really
out on a
narrowing
limb
it down
there.
for you.
Yeah. But anyway, I just remember. I totally could be wrong. I might have pulled that out of you know where, but
Yeah.
I do think
That's what
that
we're here for. The where discussion.
yeah. But I did think at the time I was like, wow, like the Packers are they got a guy who can really teach tackling, and then it kind of regressed from there. But you're right, tackling has been an issue for this team. They've mostly been hovering around slightly below average, and
Yeah.
I mean, what the moment in my mind that sticks is Darnell Savage trying to tackle Christian McCaffrey running straight down the field, he just misses and it's a touchdown. And what would have been like a
Or
20-yard gain,
Jair Alexander trying to tackle Debo Samuel in the playoffs.
yeah, and what turns into maybe a 10-yard game comes more. Although it's definitely a thing. But anyway, you probably have some numbers
Yeah.
for us. So
Well, so I wanted to break it down a little bit more. And so that was the tackling grade. Also, if you just look at the missed tackle rate, it's not exactly the same. The Packers defense summed up as a whole is 18th in missed tackle rate. As an interesting, then I also broke it down by position. It's like, where is the problem? That, at least is we perceive a problem. Where is it really a problem? And so I figured out the missed tackle rate for the the interior defensive linemen, defensive tackles, or depending. So not edge rusher, linebackers, so off-ball linebackers, cornerbacks, and safeties. As an interesting aside, the missed tackle rate across the league between these positions is not identical. Linebackers in the league have the best missed tackle rate on average at 11%. Interior defensive linemen were next best at 12.2%. Then safeties at 12.5%. Corners at 13.2%. And edge rushers come in dead last at 15.6%.
okay, that is very surprising. Because
Isn't that surprising?
It makes sense.
My sort of, without knowing anything ahead of time, I was like, well, maybe the smaller players, like the corners and the safeties, would have more trouble.
The smaller
But no.
players, the players, these are also the players that have to tackle in space a lot more often. They're not, with
Yeah.
other players to help them. Like, because I was like, oh yeah, safeties and corners are going to have the worst missed tackle rate because they're tackling guys who are already up to almost full speed. Usually they're going to be one-on-one with a guy, coming downhill at them in a lot of space. So the running back or receiver or whoever has a lot of room to work with. Edge rushers being that low on the whole for the entire league is certainly surprising and not at all what you would think.
Right. So that kind of surprised me. And so I should say that these numbers are calculated by having the missed tackles divided by the sum of the missed tackles plus the solo tackles plus the assists.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
To figure out what the missed tackle rate is. So then I looked at all the different position groups. And I'm just going to go front to back because that's the order I have it in here. The interior defensive linemen, the defensive tackles, 30th in the league.
And
with
I
a
think
missed tackle rate of 16.4%.
and no shade, but I think if you took Devontae Wyatt out, you might be up to 20th.
Are you reading my notes?
I actually was not. I swear I was not even
Are
reading.
you reading my notes?
Because here's the thing, Devontae Wyatt is so good at getting upfield. He's so good at beating his man. But if he could just finish a play, I mean, he would be a monster. And I'm guessing you did something similar.
Let me give you some numbers to support your position. So first I had Brooks was the best in the group at 9.5%. And the worst defender by far last year was Wyatt at 30% missed tackle rate.
He missed 30% of his tackles by himself?
He was out of all interior defensive linemen with at least 200 snaps, he finished 139th out of 141 players.
Who are those poor souls who are the two poor souls worse than 30%? And how bad did it get for them? But you're missing.
And so if he was the same as the rest of the team, not elite, just about league average, the defensive group, that defensive line group as a whole rises 13 spots to 17th best in the league at 11.9%.
Man, and because 30% is just untenable. It's 1 in 3 tackles you're missing.
So here is the hope. Here's a ray of hope. His rookie year, it's a small sample size, but it was only 7.1%, something like that. But his career average at Georgia his missed tackle rate was only 7.3%. So perhaps there's some hope for the interior defensive line group. That is the worst group in ranking out of all of them.
Yeah, and I think, it's not, I don't think it's crazy to be like, hey, just be as good as the rest of these guys at just getting these guys to ground. Because, I mean, tons of moments step into my mind. Almost all of them are Tommy DeVito running away from Devontae Wyatt. Almost all of them are the ones that immediately
Did we
come
really
to my
make
mind.
Tommy DeVito offensive player of the week?
He looked like Colin Kaepernick. It was amazing. This man was running free. But yeah, no, we did.
Good old Tommy the legend of Tommy
Cutlets. I mean, it was fun while it lasted. Not for us, but it was fun for someone. But anyway, yeah. So the interior D line was the worst group at tackling on the Packers last year, and Wyatt was really bad at it. But even if he's average, we can get those numbers up. But how did the linebackers look in tackling for the Packers? I know we have some changes there, but do you want to go to edge next?
Edge next. So they're kind of middle of the pack, 14th of the league at 14%. The best was Lucas Van Ness at only 6.1% missed tackle rate, and the worst was Preston at 17%. So there's and there's not much change there. So in terms of personnel, middle of the pack. I think most Packers will be happy with sort of middle of the pack.
Can I say something real quick? I feel like people aren't talking enough about Lucas Van Ness. I feel like he's been kind of overlooked this offseason. He's not been brought up. He's a top 15 pick in the NFL draft just 2 years ago, going into his second year. I feel like he looked really promising last year. I feel like he reminded me of how Gary looked first year, but he feels like a better run defender even than Gary was early on, which I know Gary coming out of Michigan was billed as even if he can't rush the passer, he can run defend. And he's a pretty good run defender. He just gets caught crashing inside a lot.
He crashes inside. He overcommits.
But I feel like Van Ness has shown that he showed pretty good discipline last year, I thought, in the limited snaps we saw him. But I feel like not enough people are getting. I'm pretty hyped for year 2 Lucas Van Ness. I'm pretty excited.
Yeah. I'd be excited if he takes the big step forward. So I don't have too much to say about the edge because it hasn't changed much and it's kind of in the middle. Linebacker was the Packers' best group, 4th in the league, with only an 8.2% missed tackle rate. The best of the group was McDuffie at 6.5%, and the worst was Eric Wilson, who didn't play that many snaps at 11.1%. Now the group lost Devondre Campbell. His missed tackle rate last year was actually a little above average for the team at 9.9%.
Okay, wait, can I ask one thing about how you're calculating the position? Just because I'm curious. Are you weighting it by snaps played, or are you just averaging the positions? Because I feel like you could argue either way. You could argue
it's snapped played. So for each team, I sum up all the missed tackles, all of the and divide that by all the sort of tackle attempts.
Okay. Yes.
So it's not an average of the individual players. It is
taking into account that some players are contributing more than others, which makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. So it's just summing up for the whole position group.
So McDuffie was their best tackler last year. That's interesting. At
linebacker, 6.5%. Yeah.
He could be a player. I feel like I watch him and I'm like, he's not bad. He just needs to do better when things are happening behind him. But when things are happening laying out in front of him and he can just go downhill, he showed a lot last year, I think, and I'm interested to see if he wins that starting job this year.
He's been a better tackler than I think we expected when he started out because he's
so small and he has short arms. He's tiny, but he's a good tackler.
He wraps people up, gets them to the ground. So we're losing Campbell, who's his last 2 years were his 2 worst years of tackling, and they still weren't bad. They're still better than league average, but his snaps will likely go to McDuffie, who was the best of the team, and then Edgerrin Cooper and Tyron Hopper. Now, Cooper, his last year in college, his missed tackle rate was 12.5%. Kind of middle of the pack in college. He finished 202nd out of 450 qualifiers. Anybody with 200 snaps or more. Even though his overall grade was excellent, that was one of his weaker aspects of the game. And then, of course, there's Tyron Hopper.
Yeah.
Whose missed tackle rate was 22.7%, and which ranked him 411th out of 450 college linebackers.
And that's the big thing with him, is we talked about when he was drafted and we did our deep dive. If you want to go back and look at any of these rookies' deep dives, we've already have them. They're back in your feed. You can go check them out. I believe we did Hopper and Cooper together. But that's the big thing with him is if he can just figure out how to tackle, he could be a really good piece for this Packers defense. But the college, numbers, the college tape show that this is a guy that really struggled to get people to the ground. Now, whether that was a product, we little teaser for the deep dive if you want to go back and listen to it. It's like, hey, while he was at Missouri, the other Missouri linebackers were actually also pretty bad at tackling. They were also one of the higher ones in the SEC at missed tackle rate. And then if you go back far enough, when he was at Florida, he actually tackled pretty well at Florida. So maybe he got worse at tackling, or when he had a bigger responsibility at Missouri, or maybe it was their scheme where he just put the linebackers in more difficult positions. Maybe he just did get worse at tackling. Maybe someone saw something at film, but it's just something to put out there where, hey, maybe there's a world where because he moved from Florida to Missouri, it put more strain on the linebackers, and that's why his tackling looks so much worse there. But also it's something that he's going to have to clean up, because if you can't tackle in the NFL, you cannot stay on the field, and you can't even be a special teamer. So it's a big swing there.
Yeah, and so while there was a little bit of ray of sunshine for the defensive lineman that they could improve, Wyatt has shown better numbers in the past, and he's having the biggest impact on their betters. I'm a little worried about where linebacker is going to go, because they're bringing in two guys who are not great tacklers in college, compared to what Campbell's been with the Packers. So we'll see where that goes. Little dark cloud flying across the sky there.
Yeah, but if you want a little ray of sunshine, they will at least be, making it sideline to sideline to participate in the play. It's like I feel like the Campbell thing is like, can't miss a tackle if you can't catch the guy. So there's that. But yeah, the linebacker position
should be fast and flying around the field now.
I think they're going to be fun to watch, but also frustrating to watch, which is all rookies. So I know that's not that much of a take, but.
Yep. And then next, going backwards, corners. They were 18th in the league last year at 13.3% missed tackle rate, and with only minor changes in personnel. So the best of though I'll talk about that in a minute. The best of the group was Valentine, actually, at 11.9%, and the worst was Keyshawn Nixon at 14.6%. Now the biggest change in the group is really going to be like bringing Stokes back. He only had like 6 tackles all last year, so he had almost no impact on their percentage. He had a career missed tackle rate of 10%, but in year 2 before his injury, it was 16.2%. And then the other addition to the group is Kalen King, who in his last year of college had a missed tackle rate of 16.7%.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say
out of 496 corners.
Yeah, so a little below average. But I just wanted to say one thing on Valentine, with a V, that is that it was something, he did have the best missed tackle rate in the group, but there were times during the year last year where they would put Corey Ballantyne on the field for like run plays and then take him off and put Carrington Valentine in for more obvious passing plays. I think just because they didn't trust Valentine as much in the run game. And that was something they told him in the offseason. They wanted him to bulk up. Apparently he's coming to camp. Apparently he's coming to camp, gained a bunch of muscle. He looks bigger. He looks stronger, looks just as fast. So maybe that's something where, that number's, I think, a little bit maybe misleading, that he was like because I don't think anyone would say he was the best tackler out of that corner group, since they were taking him off the field to like have him avoid having to tackle running backs.
You bring up a very interesting point, which is usage maybe making some players look better than others because of what plays they're on the field for. Mm-hmm. And so they're put in more difficult tackling situations than other players. It may be, missed tackle for one player because of the play they're in for is maybe different than for another. So one thing that, if you really wanted to do this right, listeners, if anybody out there feels like doing like crazy deep dive, look at what each missed tackle was for each player, and then figure out what the average missed tackle rate forced for the players they're trying to tackle, and see how much their missed tackle rate is compared to, replacement for tackling that player.
And I think
that would
you
take
could even
a very deep dive.
Yeah, and I think you could even look at it by down as well, because I think you could argue, tackles on certain certain types of plays are more condensed, and so like you're not going to miss tackles on 3rd and 1, I would hope, when the guy's just pushing the dude through the line. Like I would hope that's not going to happen. But anyway, I just wanted to add that in there because while the numbers might say Valentine is the better tackler in the corner group, they did take him off the field when they wanted better tackling. So that's just something I want to put out there.
He's always put in positions where he's tackling the easier to tackle players. That's entirely possible, and
Or
not
like
something
just
that
that the
is
tackles,
in
he's
any
only on the
way
field on.
corrected for what I did.
I was just thinking like just something to think about. It's like if you're only on the field for passing downs and you're either forcing incompletions or tackling the guy the ball is thrown to, I feel like those are a lot easier than, first and second down where you have to tackle a running back in space or a screen pass or something like that. Just something I kind of thought about. I don't know. But anyway, the corner group, I think I feel like I don't feel like any of them are bad tacklers. Like I feel like watching Carrington Valentine, you go back to that Rams game, he laid a couple good hits on like Puka Nakua, like some of those swing passes that they did, and that was like the first game where I was like Carrington Valentine was getting like real. Actually, no, it wasn't. He got real snaps in the Broncos game and got torched by Cortland Sutton, and then he played well in the Rams game, and from there like played pretty well. But anyway, so that's the corner room. Did you have anything else you wanted to say there? Or do you want to move on to the safety room where tackling I think
No,
is
let's
even
move on to
more
the
at a
safety.
premium?
Right. So safety, and last year they were 25th in the league at 14.4%. So here's an area where we are hoping to see substantial improvement. We are basically substituting Xavier McKinney's missed tackle rate of 5.4% for the top two snap share for the Packers at safety last year were Jonathan Owens at 12.6% and Darnell Savage at 17.3%. And Savage was first in snaps per game. So you're going from, like 15% down to 5% for the primary contributor to the position. So here's one where I think we can look to improve.
And I think it is funny that McKinney was saying like, yeah, 5%, like that's too high for a safety. It's like, hey, buddy, we'll take it. We will take 5. We will take 5 any day of the week. So 17 is killing
I like the
me.
cut of your giblets.
Yeah, it's like because I mean, I know you're not trying to throw shade at these other safeties, but they're not down at 5. Is all I'm going to tell you. They're way higher than that. But yeah, McKinney being that rock on the back end would just be such a massive improvement for Green Bay. I mean, how many times do we see over the years like? I mean, no offense to Darnell Savage, but just taking a poor angle, not wrapping up, just throwing a shoulder at a guy as opposed to actually trying to bring him down. But yeah, so I think that's going to be a massive improvement there for sure.
Yeah. So if you want me to ask to kind of sum it up, some position I'm not that worried about. I'm just most worried about the defensive line group, the defensive tackles. Is that going to improve? It needs to improve. And we don't want the linebackers to get worse.
Yeah.
I feel like the corners they could be a little better. I think the safeties is a very high probability that they're going to improve.
Yeah, I would hope so. I would hope so. It feels like it would be a nightmare if they didn't.
The way the defense goes, I think is going to depend a lot on how that defensive line and linebacker group does.
Yeah. And not being 30th along the defensive line would be,
yeah,
we would take it as long as
and it'd be nice for the linebackers to stay up near the top and not fall.
Yeah, big changes in that linebacker room, so I guess we're going to see. But yeah, so tackling, definitely a big issue. My first question is, and always has been, and probably always will be with Green Bay, the special teams. The special teams for Green Bay.
I was tempted to type that into your part of the outline and just say, I know you're going to do special teams.
Yeah, before I even worked on it, you could just leave that in there for me. I appreciate that you did not take it because I love ranting and raving about the special teams of Green Bay because you can make the argument that special teams cost the Packers their last 2 playoff losses. Back in, this year, obviously, coming down the field, you have a 40-yarder to go up 7 with however many, 4 minutes left, 5 minutes left. You shank it. You don't make it. San Francisco comes down, scores a touchdown, and you lose. And then 2 years ago, or I guess 3 years, however you want to count it, the playoffs that the Packers made before that, back in 2021, the whole game, your defense is absolutely locking up the Niners. You have the lead. You have control of the game. It's very sloppy. It's very messy. You're not moving the ball, but your defense has completely locked up the Niners the whole game. You go to punt with not a whole lot of time left. I can't even remember at this point. I've deleted this game from my brain otherwise. Block punt, recovered, touchdown. You lose. You just lose. And then you're done. And so special
and that wasn't
teams,
the only mistake. There were more special teams mistakes in that game as well.
And there are more special teams mistakes we can talk about all over the years. I mean, what was it back in 2021 when the Packers lost more expected points to special teams kicks than any team has lost ever or something like that. We're giving up punt returns of 30 yards every single time we kick it. But the Packers special teams has not been good enough. It just has not. In 2023, let's start with field goals. So, I mean, we're going to go through all the little aspects of special teams that the Packers have not been good enough at. Field goals has been the biggest nightmare because while you can argue, not the biggest nightmare, it was a big nightmare last year. It's probably the biggest nightmare last year. For kicking, out of 34 qualifying kickers, and this is per PFF, PFF had Carlson as their 32nd graded kicker. He had the third worst conversion rate on extra points. That's 31 out of 34. He was 25th in overall field goal percentage. He was 33rd in conversion rate from 40 to 49 yards, and he was 21st in conversion rate.
That's the one that kills me. There are only 32 teams, and he finished 33rd.
Yeah, from 40 to 49 yards is crazy. Like that, and because it boils my blood. And then he was 21st in conversion rate over 50 yards. He kicked well from 30 to 39 and 20 to 29, but who cares?
That's setting the bar really low.
Exactly. You should not. That's the thing. Those are the field goals you shouldn't be kicking. So I don't really particularly care if you're making the ones that your team should not be taking. You should be going for it on fourth there. But I mean, I guess at least he made those. So the field goals were a nightmare last year, culminating in that big miss in the playoff game. And Carlson has said that he has, found something in his approach. And I would say that most of the misses I remember were from the left hash from about 40 to 49, and he missed them left. And so he was talking about, starting his aiming point a little wider to the right. The Packers have brought in some kicking competition with Greg Joseph, and then I am forgetting the name of the rookie out of Michigan they took from the Lions. It's like James Turner?
Yes.
It is James Turner. I pulled that. So the Packers have made some additions there at kicker, but I don't think they're additions that were I'm not super energized about them. They're not blowing me away or anything because Joseph, we know what he is. We've seen him kick with Minnesota. Don't let him kick outside after Thanksgiving. And then Turner, I mean, he's a rookie, and the longest kick he made in college this past year was 50 yards on the dot. So it's
so here's the question: how many kicks in a row does Carlson have to make in the preseason before you feel good about it? Or is there no
there's no number he can make in preseason. I need to see him make like multiple high leverage kicks for me to feel confident. I mean, we all know what Matt LaFleur told Tom Rinaldi on the sideline of that San Francisco game. Every time he goes out there, I say a prayer. But I mean, I do too, Matt. I don't blame you. But the thing is, it's like he would need to, I think for me to have confidence in Carlson, he would need to make at least 2 or 3 high leverage, like end of game kicks where like it really matters. Because that's the thing with Crosby. Crosby would have stretches where he would just like forget how to kick a football, like that game in Detroit where he missed like 6 kicks. Or the Bengals game where both kickers missed like 3 or 4 kicks in a row. The Lions one was like way further back. But he always made the ones that he needed to make. He was so clutch that the fact that his actual percentages weren't that good was like whatever, because he would always make like 52-yarder to win the game, 48-yarder to win the game, 50-yarder to tie the game. Like he was always good for those, so it never bothered me that he would miss like 5 in one game at one point. I mean, it would bother me because we'd lose the game because of it. But at the same time, it's like if you make the clutch ones, I think we have accident forgiveness for the other ones. And so I would need to see him make multiple high leverage kicks. But so that's the kicking. Next up is the kickoffs. So I was actually a little surprised by this. The Packers, so I went into NFL Fast R data, shout out to them. And all that those kicking numbers on field goals were from PFF. But I went to NFL Fast R data, and according to them, the Packers actually had the 8th best opponent starting field position on drives that started with kicks. So much better than I expected. So that's like 8th best for the Packers. It's a good thing. They're up top 10 in when drives started with kickoffs, what the opponent's starting field position was. I didn't want to just look at return yards because, if you kick it like to the 10 every time and they return it 20 yards, that looks good because it's only a 20-yard return, but they're getting out to the 30 every time. But I did want to add a caveat. At the 25.28 yard line, that's like what their average was. We heard Rich Bisaccia talk about like, hey, they asked him, it's like, oh, Carlson has a big leg. Like, why do you think he's not putting it through the end zone for touchbacks? And he said, oh, that's like our strategy. We want as many returns as possible. But when you look at the numbers for average starting field position on drives starting with kicks, only 3 teams had opponents under the 25-yard line. It was like the Chargers, and I can't remember the other 2, but it doesn't matter.
And as I
You
recall, that was like barely under, right? It was like less than a yard under.
Yeah, it was like
Well,
24.88
this
or something
20,
like that.
24 something for all of them, right?
Exactly. So there were only 3 teams that, like, when they kicked the ball off, the opponent had a worse starting field position than a touchback. So you should be aiming for a touchback every single time. So it just calls into question the strategy. It's like if only 3 teams are having opponent field position on kickoffs better than a touchback, just go get touchbacks. Touchbacks are much better than giving up returns because even though the Packers were 8th best, if you're giving it to them on average better than a touchback, why don't you want touchbacks? It just doesn't make sense to me why Bisaccia would be like, we want to maximize the number of returns, because you're clearly giving up yardage there. Like, just give up at the 25-yard line. If they had kicked a touchback every single time last year, they would have ranked even better. So they would have been 4th in the league. So that just doesn't make sense to me. Going on to punting, per team rankings, the Packers ranked 28th in net yards per punt and 24th in EPA per punt per NFL FastStar data. That's also a bit of an NFL like offense stat, so I just wanted to throw that in there. But keep in mind, that's more of like an offense stat, because if you decide to, for instance, like the Packers did, I think it was punt from the opponent 45-yard line, that's not good. And so that doesn't have as much to do with like the actual punting. It has more to do with the decision to punt. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, because right, the logic is you should never ever punt from the opponent's side of the field. Once you cross midfield, you should be going 4th and 4th every time.
Exactly. And so that the EPA thing has a little bit more to do with the decision to punt. I feel like Danny Whelan did an okay job last year, but the punt coverage at times was a little suspect. I mean, look back to that Saints game where they gave up that punt return for a touchdown. But yeah, so they were 28th in net yards per punt per team rankings. So the punting was, I would say, not great, but not terrible, in my opinion. Kick returns. So the one thing that you would say the Packers were like really good at with Keyshawn Nixon, although, you know, there were times where the fumbling was maybe a bit of an issue, but for kick returns, according to NFL FastStar data, the Packers actually did have, this is probably what they were best at, the 2nd best field position on drives beginning with kicks in the NFL last season. So I wanted to look at that because, you know, you look at returns, you look at starting field position, you know, the return numbers always look really good for Keyshawn Nixon, but also you look at some of the decision making where it's like, okay, you're bringing it from 7 yards deep and you brought it out to the 24-yard line. That's a 31-yard return, but maybe you should just take the knee.
You get empty yardage from inside the end zone.
Exactly. And you could argue it's like, hey, actually taking out to the 24-yard line there is good because you had the chance, you get an opportunity to bring it out all the way, and you're really not losing that much in terms of like a loss proposition where it's like, hey, you lost a yard, but you had like a 2% chance of taking it all the way, or like a 1% chance of taking it all the way. And if you want to make that argument, like, that's totally reasonable. But I just wanted to look at starting field position on kicks to keep that in mind. But they were actually, the Packers were really good. They were like at the 28-yard line on average, and starting field position on drive starting with kicks. So that's really awesome. So that was what they were best at. But punt returns, they were 26th in return yards per punt per NFL FastStar. They were not getting a lot on returns. And then they were the 4th most penalized special teams in the league per PFF. So just to summarize, they were not disciplined. They were penalized a lot. They were really bad at putting up points in the kicking game. They were pretty good at covering kicks, but the logic behind what they were doing there seems flawed to me. And they were great at kick returns and meh at punting and meh at returning punts. They're like below average at both of those. But anyway, the point is, all this to summarize, special teams has been very poor in big moments as well. And it needs to be better. And it is something I am certainly worried about, because I look at it and it's like, oh, the offense, like, we're hoping all these guys take like a 2nd-year jump, a 3rd-year jump as they like kind of cement themselves in the league and they're getting more used to it. The defense, we have this new defensive coordinator. We're bringing in the high price safety. We are hoping like changing the strategy and changing the coaching is going to be great. And special teams, we're keeping it all the same. It's like, okay.
Oh, but Tommy, Tyler Davis is going to fix all our problems.
Yeah, it's like, oh, we lost our right hand on special teams. It's like, okay, if the whole thing falls apart because you lost Tyler Davis, like,
he was the critical Jenga piece.
Apparently he was the linchpin of the entire unit. But that's why I'm worried about it, though, is because we have like reasons to believe in the offense. We've made massive changes in the defense because we weren't happy with how they were doing. And the special teams, which was just as bad as the defense last year, in my opinion, it's just remaining unchanged. It's staying the same. We're leaving everything identical. And sure, there's like you could talk yourself into, oh, Carlson's going to improve. Oh, like I don't even know. The players are going to get more comfortable in Bisaccia's system.
Well, the whole kick return thing is going to be completely different. I mean, you can kind of
that's
scrap
true.
The strategy on kick returns is going to be
at least the Packers were pretty good at the kicking stuff. At least they were pretty good at that. So that's something that you can at least keep out there. But I'm worried about the special teams. I am worried about it. It has not been good since Bisaccia has been hired. He was brought in to fix the special teams. They haven't been better than like 25th in PFF grade. And it's lost them 2 playoff games now because the special teams wasn't good enough over 2 different coordinators. And I don't know what the fix is. I don't know why they left everything exactly the same from last year to this year in special teams. But it's something I'm concerned about. Any thoughts on the special teams, or do you want to go to your next thing you're worried about?
My biggest thing about special teams is, what is the new kickoff coverage going to look like?
Fair. I mean, we've already talked about...
That's a total mystery. Maybe it's encouraging they were okay on kick coverage, because that's something that's going to be, I think, more of a premium. This new rules are going to encourage kick returns, but where you're starting from, where you have to be to do that coverage is going to be completely different. It's going to be more like a punt coverage, which they weren't good at.
Yeah, and also we just talked about how they weren't the best tackling team. So you're going to have to tackle in space a little bit more like that. That's a little scary, but yeah. So the change in the kick is going to be something to keep an eye on, because while they were good at the old kick coverage, it does not mean that they're going to be great at the new kick coverage. So we'll see.
Yep. Fingers crossed.
So what did you have as your next worry?
My next worry is right guard. So it's kind of up in the air right now. Last year, John Runyon led the team in snaps. He had 1,006 snaps out of the 1,219 right guard snaps. And now he's gone to the Giants. Split time with Sean Ryan a bit in the second half of the year. This may have been more to give Runyon a rest while he was nursing an injury. I think I've heard like Peter Bukowski got that in an interview maybe at the Super Bowl. And Runyon was the preferred right guard starter for the last 2 years. So now he's gone. So what are the Packers' options? As of right now, the top options at right guard seem to be Sean Ryan. And is he the leader of the clubhouse right now, based on free practices we've seen? It's so early. It's hard to make any conclusions from that. Or Jordan Morgan, or Elton Jenkins, I guess, if they're comfortable with somebody else at left guard. So let's look at those options. As we talked about a couple weeks ago in our offensive line scenario episode, Sean Ryan had a pass block grade of only 42.5 last year and a run block grade of 50.8. And run blocking is supposed to be his jam coming out of college. That's his thing, big people mover. He has not been that great at it so far. On the plus side, Ryan he was credited with no sacks given up out of 128 pass block snaps last year. So, on those times where the guy just zoomed right by him, I guess he wasn't the one who got the sack.
I was going to say, that feels like a Jordan Love stat, is what that feels like. That feels like Jordan Love kind of covering up for some misses in the pass protection department from Ryan.
Yeah. And as we talked about before, I looked over Ryan's kind of game-to-game stats, and there was no actual sign of him getting better as the season went on in terms of PFF grades for run blocking or pass blocking. So that's the Ryan scenario. It has me worried.
It has me very worried. I am praying we don't have to see week 1 Sean Ryan, because I just don't think he's good enough. Unless he has improved vastly from last year to this year, I just don't think he's good enough at that right guard spot.
Yeah. So the other options is Elton Jenkins. He's only played 1 snap at right guard in his career. I think it's the one position he's played the least. He did his rookie year. He has played some on the right side at tackle, 372 snaps, but that was coming off of his ACL injury. He struggled, but that was like right off of the ACL. And remember, he came back from that pretty early in the season too.
Yeah.
Less than a year. So I think more of that was maybe he wasn't ready. And then the other option seems to be the other of the most likely options is Jordan Morgan at right guard. But in his college career, he has played precisely 0 snaps at guard of any kind and 0 snaps on the right side. So I think like right guard is probably what I think, without knowing, his least favorable position. If I had to put
swap sides and move inside. Yeah.
Right. that maybe the best scenario would be if Morgan looks really good at left guard and Jenkins goes to right guard.
Yeah, that's probably the hope. But so if you want to hear our deep dive thoughts into the Packers offensive line combinations, we actually did an episode on that like 2-3 weeks ago. So if you want to go hear like what we think about each of the different like permutations, combinations of those 5 spots, go listen to that. But like I said at the time, just as a teaser, I don't like Morgan at left guard because then you have 7th round second year starter at left tackle, first year starter at left guard who has never played guard before, just right next to each other, protecting your probably $58 million a year quarterback's blindside for the whole year. That feels really
I'm just
shaky
drinking
to
the
me.
Kool-Aid of ESPN's pass block win rate for
Walker.
Rasheed Walker.
I mean, Walker had a great year last
in the
year.
entire league.
Yeah, but it's just something where I would worry. I would worry a lot if that was the left side of the line. But yeah, so right guard is certainly an issue.
Pick your worry. Before the season starts, there's going to be a worry somewhere.
My pick would be put Morgan at right guard. But anyway, like I said, if you want to go check our whole offensive line combination,
maybe the preseason will show us that he could do it. If he could do it, that's probably the best scenario.
That's that is 100% the best case scenario, I think. Or the best case scenario might just be that if Ryan is way better this year, but that's one where I'm like, I believe it less. Yeah. For me though,
if Ryan's looking like really good this year, right? Then you might see some other shakeups.
Yeah, that is very true.
Elton to center.
I'm curious. And did you see the Elton tweet, by the way? Did you see that one?
Yes, I did. I don't remember the exact wording, but about where he was going to be playing.
It was just someone said, "Are you going to be playing at left guard this year?" And it was like a we'll see type of gif, but I guess we'll see. Anything else you want to talk about on the right guard spot for why you're worried? Because mine kind of dovetails.
There's only a couple scenarios I want, just a couple scenarios to talk about, and each one comes with a little bit of worry.
Yeah, so my last worry kind of dovetails into that a little bit, and that's run blocking and the run game in general. The Packers have really been poor in run blocking for, I would say, the past 3 years. 2-3 years, they've been, I would say, below average in run blocking. PFF had them as the 23rd best run blocking group last year. FTN Fantasy had them 22nd in power success, so that's like 3rd and 4th and short, and how well they do there. So they were bad at that. They were actually 4th best last year. These numbers are from 2023. They were actually 4th best last year in stuff percentage per FTN Fantasy, so they weren't actually giving up they weren't getting hit behind the line
That's
as
like
much.
Tackle for a loss or a loss, or I think no gain as well.
It's essentially, if you're getting tackled at or behind the line of scrimmage, that counts as a stuff. So number of runs that end up in that, they were actually pretty good at not giving those up. But yeah, so I'm worried about the run blocking. It's a little bit concerning to me that, the run game was essentially non-existent until Aaron Jones came back and pretty much put the whole run game on his back. Now, maybe that's like a bit of a silver lining where it's like, hey, you can say, hey, once we got like a good running back in there, the run game came back to being like pretty good. Maybe it's just that AJ Dillon is not good at all. But we saw last year that when the run game was not going, the number of like 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 12s that Jordan Love had to be the whole offense in his first season starting for like a 10-week period or 11-week period where he was just the entire offense. All they could do was throw the ball. They would run for a yard on first down, 2 yards on second down, and then be in 3rd and long. And that was like the entire... Do you remember how bad the first halves of those games were? Because they were going like run, pass, and it was just like, 3rd and 8, and we don't convert. And, look, it's halftime, and we have 8 total yards. Amazing. Because we just cannot get out of our own freaking way. We can't set up favorable like down and distances for the team. And so you're stuck with these like high, like low conversion rate like downs, where down and distances, that is, where it's like, and the whole thing just falls apart because the run game is the base for the Jenga tower. And once you're not able to run the ball, you end up in a lot of 3rd and longs, or you end up in 3rd and shorts and you can't convert them and you have to punt, or you have to take a lot of high, like EPA leverage, like type 4th and shorts where it's like, you don't convert them, you're going to lose. You convert them, you're going to win. And it's just not diluting, but kind of minimizing the game down to just a handful of downs. So I'm worried about the run game because besides, the run blocking being very poor last year for the most part. And and the thing is, like, you look at the offensive line, it's like, I wouldn't consider Rasheed Walker to be a great run blocker. Myers is like a good pulling like run blocker, but he doesn't like push people off the line very much. Elton is a good run blocker. Zach Tom's a good run blocker, but the right guard spot's a question. The left tackle spot's a question, and the center spot, like Myers is good at some aspects of run blocking. His movement skills are incredible for his size, but he's not getting a lot of push up there. But the other reason I'm worried about running is when we talked about Josh Jacobs, he was not good in 2023. These are some numbers we did during the free agency deep dive, so I thought I'd bring them back. But per PFF, among 59 qualifying running backs last year, he ranked 50th in yards per carry and 53rd in yards after contact per carry. He was 50th in EPA per carry per NFL FastR, and he was 46th in success rate. And then he was 41st per Next Gen Stats in rushing yards over expectation per attempt. So he wasn't good last year, and we're putting him behind an offensive line that didn't look good until we put a great running back like behind them, or running back there, that is. And so a bad run blocking line behind a running back who really struggled in 2023, I'm worried we might end up in the same place we did last year at the start of the first half of 2023, where we had no running game. And so the whole thing is on Jordan Love's shoulders, where it's like you're going to have a lot of third and longs. You're not going to be able to convert third and shorts. You're not going to be able to stay on script. You can't build the offense out through the running game like Matt LaFleur likes to do, where everything, you start with the running game and it builds off of it, and it has a natural progression to it throughout the game as a play caller. And certain plays look like other ones that you called earlier when you called the run. And so it's just kind of like the base of this offense is the running game. And if you rip it out, we saw in the first half of last year, because yes, everyone talks about, like the first half of last year, the offense was like, you had the receivers running the wrong routes. You had like checks at the line that weren't being communicated properly, et cetera, et cetera. And that's all true. But also, to me, the main reason the offense was bad was not about the receivers running the wrong routes all the time, although that definitely was part of it. It was that they just could not establish any kind of running game. They couldn't get into any kind of third and reasonable. They could not convert. Like they had nothing in like a whole half of your offense. So all of it had to be passing game. And that just makes things so predictable for the defense. And so I'm worried about the running game a little bit coming into 2023. What do you think, Dad?
Yeah, so this is something I think that a lot of people in national media kind of miss out on. It's like, Jacobs was going to the Packers. They have a good offensive line. He should do better. Well, they have a good pass blocking offensive line.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I would not consider this. And then you look at the offensive line. It's like, I mean, they do a good job like dealing with what they have, but you actually look at the individual players, and it's like, I would say they have two good starters on the offensive line out of 5 spots, which I would not consider a good offensive line.
Here's something I was thinking about listening to other podcasts, that the Packers' offensive line is greater than the sum of its parts.
Oh, yes. I would say 100%. And always has been,
right?
in some ways. Well,
right.
maybe not. Maybe not always has been.
As a unit, but like as a whole offensive line unit, and like pass block win rate by ESPN, it's really good and better than you would expect from just looking at the individual players.
Yeah, I think they do a really good job in this scheme. I think it was Brandon Thorne of Trench Warfare, and he was on the Athletic Football Show. He's like, this. He considers that this, like the Matt LaFleur scheme, is the most friendly to offensive line of all the schemes, and that it does a really good job of helping them and not putting them in disadvantageous situations where they have to do too much, which I would agree with. But yeah, that's the thing is like you can't. There aren't a lot of like little tricks and things you can do in short yardage running. Like you just kind of have to move your man. Like you just have to win your block, and that's like you can't do any tricks or any kind of smoke show to
when you're like 3rd and goal at the 2-yard line. Can you just pull your way into the end zone?
And the thing is, the Packers have not been able to do that for several years. So we're going to see if adding Jacobs is going to change that. We're going to see if having Morgan along the line is going to change that at all, or any other shakeups there. But I'm a little worried about the run blocking.
I think it's fair to worry about. Hopefully the Packers will just, assuage all our fears.
Because just think about how good the offense looked when Aaron Jones was like healthy, and like how and that's maybe an argument for bringing in Jacobs. It's like, hey, we could not afford to not have a good running back for half the games. Like, did you see how bad it was when he missed time? We need a guy who's going to be out there all the time.
We need a guy who's going to be there all the time. Yeah.
But if they get 2023 Josh Jacobs, that's his biggest selling point, is that he's going to be out there all the time. That's the only selling point. But if they get 2022 Josh Jacobs, on the other hand, we are in business. We're cooking. But anyway, anything else you want to say on the running game, or should we wrap things up here?
I think we could wrap things up. And I think I got my say.
Okay, well, we've been sufficiently negative for a whole episode, but thank you for listening all the way to the end if you did. We've been doing an episode once a week for the rest of the off season, and then twice a week once the season begins. So keep your ears on your audio feeds for that, whether that's Apple, Spotify, Google, YouTube. Please subscribe. We would really appreciate it. Leave a comment, leave a review, 5 stars. Let us know what you're thinking. Give us some feedback. We would really appreciate it. Then follow us on Twitter at FatherSonPacker. We tweet out whenever we have new episodes. Articles we find interesting, Packers news, data from these episodes when we're doing research. But anyway, thank you again so much for listening. Next week will be a much more positive episode, I promise. And until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.